we've got the bread going. Now I'm going to show you something here. We pulled this out of our stores, but common, right? Apple juice. Now if you look on the side here, for the ingredients, we've got apple juice, ascorbic acid, and vitamin C. Well, vitamin C. So there's no preservatives in it. This is very important because if we are going to use some of this yeast to give us something to try and take the edge off of an addiction that is needed, and we have no income, but you have a dollar box of juice and some yeast, then I'm going to show you what you can do. Back to my other thoughts. So we have plain apple juice, no preservatives. That's really important. Can't be any potassium sorbate or anything like that in there, because then what we're about to do won't work. Get the bread, fresh bread we just made out of there. Now, commercial apple juice is made basically from the apples that weren't good enough to be sent to the stores. This does not mean that there was rotten apples in there or anything like that, but it's from, for the most part, eating apples. So as much as it is apple juice, it isn't very flavorful. It really isn't. Sweet, absolutely, but there's not much apple flavor to it. So what we're basically going to do is we're going to make a cider. And I'll just show you, this is really minimalist equipment. Got a 2-liter bottle here. Got 1 liter of apple juice. So I'm going to open it up, put it in the bottle. Here is yeast, basically baking yeast. You can go to the department store, grocery store, and they do sell, often they'll have a like a homebrew or a wine making section where they'll have kits. They might sell separate packets of brewing yeast. For our purposes and for what I'm saying, it's just a different strain of the same yeast. What the yeast does is it chows down on sugar and turns it into carbon dioxide and alcohol. And when you're struggling and you know you can't drop $50 on, well, it's almost what a case of beer is now, but you've got issues that you know you're working on, but you got to get there, then we got to find something that works, and this will work. Like I said, it's not going to taste the greatest. What's going to help you is how much everyone's washing and cleaning everything. Because you can have, I mean, this is going to wind up tasting super greatest, but it's not going to be super horrid. Okay? Now, what can happen is if you're not keeping things clean enough, other bacteria can start growing in there. And it's not going to be a risk to your health. It's just going to make it taste absolutely awful. One of the big ones is the vinegar bacteria. And what the vinegar bacteria does if it gets in there is it doesn't chow down on sugar. It chows down on alcohol, and it produces vinegar and water and carbon dioxide. So we've started out with the yeast producing alcohol and carbon dioxide, and then if you get the vinegar bacteria working in there too, it's now going to eat the alcohol and produce vinegar. So you'll go straight from apple juice to apple cider vinegar, which probably isn't the goal. So you make sure everything's clean. Put your here. Let's use a funnel. We have the technology. Let's use it. Okay. You're not going to see too much because I'll be out of the camera range, but that's okay. Now the reason I have the other stuff there, the frozen concentrate is because this apple juice, I've tried it before, it is very generic, it is very basic, and it has no bite to it. It's just sugar water basically with some apple flavor. It is juice, but not much to it. By adding some of this, well, lemons have a lot more of a sharpness to them, a lot more bite. That and the yeast performs a lot better when you have certain acid levels. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a bit in there. Here, we're going to keep using the funnel because that'll get it in there well. Now, I'm not using any of the other brewing equipment or anything like that I have a lot of. I've actually been doing beer and wine and things for, for a number of years now, actually a number of decades. So this is the raw basics. Yeah, so this is concentrate. So this will add some sugar too. But it won't have so much sugar that it'll kill the yeast. But it will be enough sugar that it'll be like a cider strength. Ooh, let's put this in the freezer. And what I'm going to do is use the yeast because I baked bread just earlier today, and I had activated the yeast overnight in the bowl and dumped it into the stuff, and as you can see in the side there, the bread came out just fine. I'm going to make sure that this has the yeast down in it. Stir it all up, because yeast does not care where the sugar comes from. If it comes from stuff you've mixed in with the bread dough, it does its job. It produces alcohol, carbon dioxide, and it's the carbon dioxide that makes the bubbles in the bread, makes it rise, or gives the effervescence to your cider and beers and things. Now, difficulty with doing what I just did, and I realize now, is I just dumped it over the ice. So I just flash chilled that sucker. It's quite possible the yeast is going to give its head a shake and go, oh my goodness, I need to go dormant. But wait, I'm warm again, so I'll just poke it down through the funnel here. So you'll notice I didn't really measure a lot out. The thing to remember, we do have all kinds of science to go along with brewing, but it is an art. And that means you can do almost whatever you want, and chances are it's going to work all right. Now remember how I said it's going to be biting the sugar and producing carbon dioxide? I'm not going to leave this lid tightened down. I tightened it down right now so that I can stir it up. Now that yeast is in a whole new volume. That volume can support a lot more yeast than I just put in. So what it's going to do, it is going to replicate. It's going to infect, really, the whole batch and start chowing down on the sugar that's in the naturally in the apple juice and in the lemon concentrate that I put in there. Those two or three scoops or whatever that I put in there should actually add some more acid to it. It'll help the yeast survive a little better, because it does require some nutrients. And then, yeah, it should only take, actually, if it gets going the way I'm thinking it will, it's only going to take a couple days. And it's going to take 2 or 3 days, and it will have consumed most of the sugar once it gets rolling. I don't have an airlock on here. So when you're doing actual brewing, you'll put an airlock on the top that lets the excess carbon dioxide escape while keeping icky things out. Well, that's extra equipment. That's extra money. The whole point of trying to do this is to, like, I need something or I'm going to go nuts. So let's keep from going nuts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this up for now. I'll come back later, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just feel the bottle. And when I can feel that it's getting pressurized, I can loosen the lid off till it starts to hiss, kind of like when you first open a pop bottle or whatever. It lets out the carbon dioxide. I'll open it just enough so it starts to hiss, because then I know it's still pressurized, but it needs a certain pressure before that comes out. The gases that are escaping are going to smell like yeasty apple juice. This is going to potentially attract fruit flies and all sorts of, and any sort of other pests that will carry bad bacteria on them. What you can do then is you just take a clean rag, put it over top, like just tie it off around there. These bottles will not actually burst until they probably hit at least 90 psi. And even if they do, they're plastic, they'll just split and make a mess. So if you forget to loosen it, that's what's going to happen. It's going to make a mess. Keep it somewhere kind of at room temperature, so maybe 20 degrees. If you were making actual, wines or whatever for a competition, you'd usually go cooler than that, and those are different strains of yeast. They can handle it. This is bread yeast. Over time, if you keep dumping off and just adding more juice and keep a process going, you will actually develop your own unique strain of brewing yeast. I mean, it's just, that's an aside. That's the science we found out after. People have been making this stuff for a long time. And that's it. In a few days, that will have turned those sugars in there to alcohol, and you'll be able to have a drink. If you want, you can set up several bottles and then have sort of a production thing going where you leave it in here, let it ferment for 2 or 3 days, then you pour off into another bottle that's all clean and everything, let it sit for a couple more days, top this one back up, leaving the yeast in the bottom, right? You just dump the liquid off, you'll see the yeast settle out, you can leave that in the bottom, and then it's ready to go. You add apple juice, make sure it's not fridge temperature, right? Get it all to room temperature. Add that in, and then just keep it going for as long as you need to. I know there's a lot of people out there who have gotten addicted, and they're not at a place where they can, where you can just sort of go cold turkey. And in fact, the doctors even have said that, yeah, for some individuals, doing that will irreparably harm them. And we don't want that. We want to get through this. So this is a way you can do it. I'm going to put this away. I'll come back with another clip in a couple days, and we'll see how it's going. And hopefully in the end, it'll be a quick how-to, and then you can try it. It's not hard, it's not complicated. We're not trying to maximize the alcohol or anything. That would require more setup, more tools. You don't need it. A lot of these fruit juices naturally are well set up to produce alcohol, which is why we've been using them for thousands of years. All right? See you in a couple days. Now remember how I put all of the apple juice and the yeast and everything in the bottle? Well, there it is. That was 5 days ago. It really took off fermenting on the weekend. And then I remembered that I needed to give a few other safety precautions. This bottle right now is it's rock hard. Absolutely solid. Because of the pressure from the fermenting inside. I'm just going to squeeze the cap. See, I didn't put the cap on super tight. And now it's a little softer. But all that sugar produces a lot of carbon dioxide. There. Can you hear that? It is bubbling like crazy. Now these bottles will burst, and they'll make quite a mess. So you can't really just throw the cap on tight and leave them. I had left the cap on and then barely tightened it to touch in the belief that if the pressure's high enough, it'll start to escape past the edge of the cap. But really, it needs to be monitored and checked on. It did take it a couple days more than I expected for the fermentation to really get going. I would think by now there's not a lot of sugar left. We'll move on to the next stage. And just stir it up a little. Before we finish it off, we'll add a little bit of probably basically sugar water into the final bottle so it can have a little bit of some effervescence to it, some bubbles, and that might improve the taste a bit, because it should. And yeah, what I'm going to do then is transfer the liquid from here, most of the liquid, to another bottle, and then put a fresh liter of apple juice in here. And by swapping bottles, you'll have sort of a continuous supply, because it does take a few days for this to work. So once you've got it set up at a supply level that will work for you, you can just keep it going, because this was just baking yeast. But as it adjusts to being a more of a brewing yeast, it will subtly change itself as the generations of yeast go through, and you may wind up with, well, you will wind up with your own unique flavors, and yeah, that's how actual brewing strains were developed. So we will we'll have another look in a couple days.